Good evening, everyone. Well, this is how we're going to do Wednesdays for a little while. I'm going to be uploading the teaching, specifically the stories of the Bible, and I will put them up on my Facebook page at 7 o'clock. And the reason I really want to be precise on the time is so you can get used to coming here at 7 o'clock on Wednesday nights. And I will also be online to just chat, answer questions, anything like that during this teaching time. So you can expect, I don't know, anywhere from at least 30 minutes, no more than 60 minutes, from 7, say, block out 7 to 8 o'clock. And we'll spend some time together connecting online and talking online while this video is playing. It's actually easier. And even though I may go live on Wednesdays in the future, I think this is easier actually to be able to communicate because I don't have to teach while I'm typing and answering some of your questions. So for the foreseeable future, this is how we're going to be doing Wednesday nights. I'll also take this time to say that we will do a complete online service starting Sunday. We're going to have some things, hopefully I'll tell you more about it later, but some interaction, some things you can do, even driving on the property to be able to participate in a way that will make you a servant, really, to help people. And we'll tell you more about that. That's going to come up. I'll probably talk about that tomorrow. But right now, let's get into the Word of God, okay? I really believe there's a hunger arising for the Bible. And to really, really study the Bible and know what the Bible says. And that's why a few weeks ago on Wednesday night, I said, hey, let's start a series called The Stories of the Bible. And we're going to go through, starting in Genesis, and go through the stories of the Bible. And I don't know, I don't see us going through every book of the Bible that way, but especially these foundational stories, at least in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, the books of Moses, it's called. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. We will look at these stories and unpack the stories and just see what wisdom that there is for us. Now, let's talk about stories here for just a moment. And then we'll pray and get into Genesis chapter 4. It's the story of Cain and Abel. But let's talk about stories for just a minute and the importance of stories. You know, at the core of who we are is a story with many, 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 many chapters in this one continual story. And I think if you consider a couple things, you'll understand what that means. First of all, is that our real knowledge and the way we view the world, the way we interact with people, how we feel about ourselves, wouldn't you agree that all of that is really a reflection of our experiences? Not necessarily the theories and the ideas that we've been taught. And so there's 2 ways to absorb knowledge. One is through reading a book. It's through hearing someone lecture. It's somebody told you something or wrote it up on a board. Okay, so that's kind of the theoretic way of passing along information, and that is good, and that can change our lives, I suppose, to some degree. But I think all of us would agree, experience, on the other hand, now that's a different thing altogether, man. You can read about fire and know the theories of fire and examine what fire is or whatever, but there's nothing like burning your hand to really understand what fire is all about, right? And so, there's the theoretic that comes in the form of reading or hearing someone communicate something. Then there's that personal experience. And I think we all would agree then that our life is more built on a combination of experiences. Well, what are those experiences? They're stories, okay? And so we are one big long story. We are a result of one big long story with these many, 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 many chapters, untold amounts of chapters and subplots and semi-stories that are put together. Some of the stories we remember. There's a lot of stories and experiences we don't remember. But just because you don't remember it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on you. In fact, maybe some of the most powerful, impacting, motivating, directing, even manipulating motives within us come from stories, events, and experiences that we don't even remember. And in that unconscious world of the universe that exists in us. And so we are many, many layers, and none of us really understand how many layers there are. And All of those layers are stories, and it combines to give us our worldview, our mental constructs, our interpretation of people, our interpretations of world events, and how we react to things like viruses, for heaven's sakes, or, how we react of whether it's a big conspiracy or if it's God's judgment or if it's just a random natural occurrence. All of these things and how we react to that and how we react to people and whether we trust people or we don't trust people, whether we're suspicious and cynical and sarcastic, all of that is just part of the story. So, what's that mean? Well, it means that stories matter, okay? Stories matter. Now, who doesn't love a story, right? I mean, one of the things I always did with my kids and my grandkids too, I say, come over here, Papa's going to tell you a story. Oh, and they love it. I mean, they'll sit down and get real intent. Now, their attention spans aren't real long, so I gotta make it fast paced. And then they get to a certain age, and then they want to add to the story, which is pretty cool. And my grandkids are starting to do this. I'll start telling a story, and usually it's about them and a superhero or something, and I'll get in the story, and then they'll stop me and they'll say, no, Papa, and then they'll take over, and then I'll listen to them, put a few pieces into the story, and then I hijack it back, okay, because it's my story, and I'll hijack it back, and then keep going. So telling stories, I mean, we love stories. That's why we go to movies. That's why we have Netflix. That's why, we'll sit down and read a book. We love stories. These stories matter. The stories of the Bible matter. And you got to ask yourself this question: how did these stories endure? And you might say, well, they endure because God ordained them, and that who can argue with that, right? That's it. Yes, God ordained them, but let's have a little bit more fun than that. Let's not stop our ideas there, or our ponderances at that point. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's ask ourselves, well, these stories are told. There's a lot of stories and a lot of truth that die off to history that no one will ever know. Why these stories? Why do stories endure? That's a good question. Why do stories endure? And there may be many reasons. Let me just throw this one out. That stories endure, and I'm going to say the stories of the Bible, because even though we are saying that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, at least he's accredited with writing these books, so we're going to assume that's true. But Moses wasn't around when Cain and Abel did their thing. Okay, so how did Moses know that? How did he know the story? Well, let's take the short answer. The short answer is because he went up on the mountain and God told him. End of story. I guess we could do that. Well, what fun is that? So let's explore this a little bit. Let's use our brains a little bit. Well, what if these stories were oral traditions that have been passed down for generations after generation after generation? Which is probably more likely, because when Moses went to the mountain, God gave him the law for Israel. But where did these stories come from? The story of creation, the story of the Garden of Eden, the story, and we've covered all these. We looked at all these and studied these. The story of Adam and Eve and their fall. Now we get to the story of Cain and Abel. Well, it's highly more likely that these were enduring stories that have been passed down from generation to generation, probably from Adam and Eve to Seth, their next child after Cain and Abel, and then from Seth down through the generations of Enoch all the way down to Noah. I mean, these stories probably were oral traditions. And the reason that oral traditions are so important is because before people could read, this is how they learned their history. And I'm reminded a lot of that line in Fiddler on the Roof, where the father, when asked by his daughters, why they keep these traditions, he made a statement something like this. He said, it's our history and our traditions that tell us who we are. Right, that's a good line, okay, because that's why these stories endure, and that's why they're important, because these stories tell us who we are. Man, the story of Cain and Abel, it goes so deep, and it speaks to a lot of different things, okay? So, that's why stories endure. That's why stories are important. If you think about stories, one of the reasons they endure, and I don't know that I said this, because I said the short answer is, well, God ordained it, and that's who could argue with that, right? That's the right statement. But why are certain movies popular? Like why has Star Wars literally been around since I was a kid? and has become part of our national identity. It's like we know what Wookiees are. We know what a Wookiee looks like, right? It's like, how do we know that? Or Lord of the Rings, like we know Elvish writing when we see it. And, a lot of people even try to study it. I mean, they've got a whole alphabet. Like, why do these stories endure? Stories endure because we find ourselves in them, okay? They speak to the heart. Now, there's a couple of, questions someone could ask, let's say in modern stories, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, or Lucas's Star Wars. Let's use those two examples. Someone might say, well, did the authors intentionally put all this information in? And I would say probably in the case of Tolkien and maybe even Lucas, I'm not sure, but I think definitely they did intentionally put some things in there that speak to the human heart, and it's a part of our mythology. It's a part of these archetypes that we all kind of understand, maybe intuitively. But I think there's a lot of authors, and to some degree, I would say Tolkien and Lucas did the same thing, is that they wrote these stories in a way that appeared right to them. Like, I think fictional writers sometimes just get in a vein and the story unfolds. I hear a lot of fictional writers actually say this, that they're following the story. It's like the story's out there and they're chasing it almost like a reporter would chase a story. And it's a fiction and it's coming from their own mind, but something deep in them just says, yes, this is the way this needs to unfold. And these characters and how they act and what they say and the decisions they make. It's like a fictional writer feels their way through this story. And even though they plan the story, there's no doubt, but at the same time, there's a lot of parts of that story that just intuitively they kind of feel their way through. Well, let's take then ourselves as the audience. When we watch these stories, guess what we do? We follow that same track, and something internally in us, something deep in us. And as a Christian, what I would say that what is deep in us is the story of God. It's the story of divinity. It's the story of God's quest to call us back to Him. Because that's why we love happy endings. I mean, like sometimes writers will just make an unhappy ending because they want to shake us, right? And it does. We leave the theater, let's say, and it's like, oh, I hate that ending. And then we talk about it for the next 2 weeks. Well, that's exactly what the author wanted. He wanted to shake, or she wanted to shake our sensibilities in the sense of this isn't right. But I mean, what feels right? What feels right is that story when Casey doesn't strike out. Like, I remember hearing that the first time when I was a kid. I heard that I had a teacher that read the poem of Casey coming to bat. And I was so expecting him to hit a home run, and he struck out. And it's like, seriously, I was like 8 years old when I heard that. And to this day, okay, almost 50 years later, I'm still disturbed by that. Like, I'm still a little ticked off that he struck out because it should have been a happy ending, right? Well, that's because we have divinity. We are created in the image of God. We are created to connect with God, and we are created to see things turn out for the good. It's like, that's right. That sits well. And if it doesn't turn out with a happy ending, something's not right. It's incomplete. Okay? It's like you just get all OCD on it, right? You just can't handle this connection not happening. It's got to turn out to a happy ending. And literary works, they do things intentionally to kind of provoke us, and it does provoke us because we are wired for happy endings. Now let me go back to stories. See, stories that don't have that happy ending, we just feel like something's missing. And so the author, I think deep down is unfolding something about life and something about themselves that go on the pages, and they may not even fully understand and comprehend what they're writing. They just know that it appears right, and the story makes sense, and the story flows, and the story, it harmonizes itself. And so they publish it in a book or maybe a movie, and then we watch it or we read it, and we say, yes, like, this makes sense. I like this. We don't even know why we like it, but we do. And here's an interesting thing specifically about stories we like, and make some comments, like throw down some movies that you know that do this. Like, for instance, here's the thing that so many movies have in common that's about life. It's this. There's a common guy, common girl, nothing special about them. Like, they're just living their life and doing their thing. I mean, you can think of 1,000 movies that start out that way. Like AI. You remember that? Or was it iRobot or AI? I think it was AI. And, you know, it just starts out and he's just kind of a normal kind of cop, and then finds himself entangled in this world, you know. And so we have common people, and then they unwittingly or unwillingly find themselves in this drama, and they didn't plan for it. Now think about how many movies do that. Okay, Star Wars. You got Luke Skywalker. He's just a farm boy, and then all of a sudden, through a series of events, he buys a droid called R2-D2, and then just he's thrust in this world that he didn't anticipate. Okay, how about Batman? Okay, so Batman's just a kid going to the theater and sees his parents shot, right? And he didn't know what was going to happen, and then he tries to get back in touch with himself. And one of the storylines, he falls in a well and he sees the bats, and then all of a sudden he becomes Batman. How about Superman? It's like he's just a baby on a planet. And his mom and dad put him on a spaceship and send him away, and he just, you know, comes to Earth, and he's kind of a normal kid, but yet he's got these superpowers. So then he finds himself in this emergency situation that he has to handle. Spider-Man, kid goes to the museum, right, or a zoo or something, gets bit by a spider. It's like then suddenly he's got these powers. So you think about the stories of Tolkien, with The Hobbit. Okay, hobbits are just, you know, laid-back creatures that like to live in trees, and everything's good, but they get thrust into this adventure they didn't plan for. The same thing with Frodo, Lord of the Rings. It's like him and Samwise did not intend to get involved, but yet just living through normal life, suddenly something happens, and like, wow, now I'm thrust into a situation I don't like. Follow me here. Follow me. I'm thrust into a situation I don't like, and now I've got to overcome the beast. I've got to slay the dragon. I've got to overcome this obstacle. There's the antagonist, you know, this form of evil, and I didn't expect this. And now I gotta climb Mordor and throw a ring in a volcano. It's like, wow, I didn't expect this. But think about why we love those stories. And maybe you've never consciously thought about it, but unconsciously you have. And here's why: because that's our life, right? It's our life right now. I didn't ask for coronavirus. Like, people that have died, they didn't expect this. They just went to a coffee shop, right, in Italy or wherever. You know, it's like we intuitively connect with these people that just live their life, and all they want to do is have a happy life and, you know, enjoy themselves. And then tragedy strikes, like this unforeseen challenge, just like comes out of nowhere, and then they have to fight. And then you don't have to fight. Like, you can just give up and sit down. Well, that doesn't do you any good, doesn't do the world any good, doesn't do your family any good, your friends no good. And so we're just encouraged and spurred along to tackle the beast, to face the antagonist, to rise up and overcome this challenge. And then the Lord of the Rings, you know, they don't do it alone. They make the Fellowship of the Ring. So we relate with that. And we may not know it, but that's our life. I mean, that gets played over and over in our story, right? Isn't that the story of your life? Like, you're just living your life and you don't expect this thing to happen, and then all of a sudden it does. And then what do? We have to overcome it. We have to continue on. We have to go forward. That's what resonates in our spirits. It's because God put that in us. That's why we're going to overcome this challenge right now, okay? We're going to overcome this. I mean, cultures and people and civilizations and human beings not too long ago have overcome far worse than this, okay? So, look, if the worst thing about it is you don't have toilet paper, dude, listen, you're doing good, all right? And we're going to bond together, and we're going to stay together, and we're going to have a fellowship. And that's why these stories are important. That's why stories resonate with us. I've probably spent way too much time talking about that because I haven't even prayed yet. I'm going to do that now, and then we're going to read Genesis chapter 4, the story of Cain and Abel, and why that makes sense to us and why it's important for us to know the story of Cain and Abel. Okay, you ready to pray? All right, let's pray. God, we thank you that we have an opportunity now to be together, to be touched by you in our homes, wherever we are. I pray that you would open up our hearts and lives and help us to understand this story, this great story, really, and why Moses wrote it down. Help us to understand that, to unpack this truth. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So Moses wrote this, and he wrote this story of Cain and Abel. Why? Well, in the big picture, he has to take the Israelites who have been slaves for all their life, for many generations, and he has to take those slaves from being slaves into being a nation. And not just a nation, he's got to create a conquering, victorious nation. And that, you say, well, okay, that doesn't sound that hard because they were already a bunch of people. Listen, a nation is a very complicated thing. You have a legislation system in your nation. You have an economic system in your nation. You have healthcare in your nation. You have education in your nation. You have the commerce, trade, all of the things that make a nation. Moses had to create basically from scratch, although that's why God put him in Pharaoh's courts for 40 years, because he learned all of that information in Pharaoh's courts. So he learned how to create a nation, how to lead a nation, what a nation needs, and then God uses him. He kind of strips away some of the things from Egypt, and then God sends him back, and he's going to redeem the people of Israel. He's going to make them a great nation so they can live in what's Canaan land. And in the process, part of that national identity to create the culture of who these people were, he told stories. Moses wrote down a bunch of stories right here in the Bible, and this is one of them. And this is a story, Cain and Abel is a story, let me just summarize it. Cain and Abel is a story of how and why you do your best every day. And it's a story that says we cannot be upset and angry at those around us that seem to be prospering more than us. Because if we get angry and we don't fulfill what we can do in the culture, then everything suffers. And in fact, the kind of culture and society that you want to live in, you have to first display. Okay, let's think about this. The kind of culture that you want to live in, the kind of society that you want to live in, you and I personally have to first display. And the story of Cain and Abel is a story of God's opportunity to create a people, maybe a civilization, that would reflect the best for mankind. And that's God's agenda. Listen, God's agenda is not to punish, it's not to pour out wrath and judgment all the time. It's like that's not God's end game. It's very, very clear in Scripture that God's end game is to bring us to the best, us as human beings, to the best level of life and existence possible, with the least amount of suffering and with the most amount of good that we can experience. And you define good by, obviously some things like food and clothing and fellowship and shelter, the indices of life that are measurable, that bring happiness and wellness. I mean, that's God's agenda. But there's other things over here that destroy that. And so God has tried to shepherd human beings into this other realm. And it's not easy to do that, right? Sometimes in order to shepherd your kids through their age development, sometimes you have to get on a very elementary level with them when they're little, right? You have to maybe speak baby talk to them. You have to be plain, like yes, no, good, bad. And you do that as a parent because you have to lower yourself to get on that level to shepherd them into maturity, into what as a parent you want them to live like. And I just see that God has parented civilization. He's parented humanity since we were created. And his purpose is to put us in the best position possible. Okay, so Cain and Abel, that's this story, we'll read it now. It really speaks to that. And that's why Moses put it in the lexicon of stories that he would use to create this nation, this culture and civilization that we now know as Israel. And it's based on this. So here we go. Verse 1. Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Stop right there. That's an important statement. I have acquired a man from the Lord. And so what Eve is acknowledging here, just in the opening line of this story, is that her and Adam procreated, and she in pain gave birth to Cain. But look what she said, that she received him from the Lord. And so there's an acknowledgement. And this is an important statement that Moses is trying to make for the children of Israel. Here's an acknowledgement that it's through unity and teamwork and even through pain that fruitfulness is born. But we also know that God is at work in the whole thing, the whole event. God is at play in that event. He is shepherding that event. She just didn't say, well, look, Adam and I, we procreated. Now we have a son. And they did procreate. They had a son. It was teamwork. It was both of them working together. And she, through pain, gave birth to Cain. However, she also acknowledges that this is a blessing from God. And so maybe Moses is saying that to Israel as slaves, that it's through our hard work and it's through our teamwork, it's through our unity that we're going to be fruitful. But let's not forget to give God the glory. Okay? There's a sense of humility and there's a sense of walking in wisdom when we know there's someone above us. And that's what Eve is doing. And Moses teaching Israel that God is above them. Let's acknowledge God. And God wants us to acknowledge Him not because He's insecure and He needs our affirmation. God wants us to acknowledge Him because when a person or a people acknowledges God, then they are admitting there is something higher than them. And I think our forefathers, while deists, certainly, they still had this idea that the rights that we are given as human beings were given to us, not by the state, but those rights were given to us by our Creator. And the state has to acknowledge my right given by God that I have these certain unalienable rights, and we might call them human rights. And we might argue with human rights and civil rights, especially with health care, and that's a good conversation to be having right now. But here's the big picture: is that our founders in this nation, in the United States, knew that God was the giver of those rights and the state had to recognize them. And there is something healthy. It helps us walk in humility. It helps us walk in the understanding that I'm accountable to someone whenever we have God above us. Okay? Even if the concept of God maybe is not fully developed like perhaps a conservative Christian would want it to be, it is still in that acknowledgement that there is a sense of humility and accountability that is achieved, and that is important for a people. And that one line in the opening line of the story of Cain and Abel is essentially Eve declaring that over the son, the first person born on earth, declaring that over her son. Verse 2, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And so the boys were identified by their work and by their labor. And of course, that's what men do. And that's okay. Like, Abel is identified as a shepherd and Cain is identified as a farmer. It seems right for Cain to be a farmer because his father Adam was a farmer. He was a gardener. That was his original commission by God. And so Cain kind of followed in his father's footsteps. And so his father gave him the task of working the ground. And Abel was a tender of sheep, a shepherd of sheep. So at least by the point when Cain was born, they were still maybe vegetarians and they were growing their food. But somewhere along the line, it seems that human beings became carnivores. Now, they may have just kept the sheep because they drank goat's milk and used the wool as clothing, perhaps, but probably also for a food source. And so you have the two boys. They're identified by their labor. Now that's an important thing that Moses is saying to slaves because, slaves are identified as a slave, just as a tool. Right? A slave is just something that someone owns. But Moses is saying, no, from the beginning, that our labor and the things that we do as vocation, those things are sacred. Those things are important. And here's how those vocations actually become sacred, because we use the resources of those vocations as an offering to God. Look what it says. Verse 3. In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. Whoa. Let's put the brakes on here and talk about this for just a minute. This is the first time in the Bible that an offering is actually recognized, like this sacrifice, this giving of an offering. And so let's try to figure out what that was all about. Like, how did they know to do that? Again, the short answer is, well, God told them to. Okay, well, if you don't want to think any more than that, you can turn off the video and be about your day. But how and why did God tell them to? You know, there's some questions here that we can ask and try to go a little deeper in this subject. So, you know, we ask ourselves, what is an offering? You know, why give an offering? Why was that important? And in my estimation, as best as I can understand this, an offering connects the dots of the past and the future. It connects the dots of the past and the future. And the way that that's possible is an offering is two things. It's an acknowledgement of thanksgiving to God for what I've been given, but it connects it to the future because I am going to give back to God with the hope and the faith that in the future there's going to be blessings. Now, the future aspect of an offering of sacrifice is not an uncommon thing. And in fact, there's a lot of scriptures that talk about, that we give offerings to God. It's like planting a seed. And Cain would have understood that as a farmer, right? It's like, don't eat all your seed. Put some seed in the ground. Sacrifice that seed, because what you're doing is you're making a bargain with the future. And you are saying by this action that if I defer my gratification for the future, I will have greater gratification, right? And that's the basis of investing, of saving money, deferred gratification. So you have discipline, you implement some good strategies and due diligence, and you plant your seed in some good ground. And what you're saying is, I could have a few meals today from the seeds I'm going to put in the ground, but I'm going to sacrifice them because I believe that in the future, the deal that I'm making with the future is going to be such that the harvest and the reaping of that seed will be greater than the seed that I put in the ground. And almost surely it is. That's gardening 101. We know that. And so the giving of a sacrifice must have been in their mind this twofold thing. Number one, gratitude for what God has given me. I have a harvest, and I'm going to take some of this harvest. This would be Cain. I'm going to take some of the harvest. And so first, it's an act of gratitude. Thank you, Lord. Now, when we offer an offering of gratitude to the Lord, think about all of the elements of that. What we're saying is that God is over me, and so, that concept that Eve introduced. But we're also saying this. We're saying, God, that you are my source, that I'm a blessed person. Let me almost use the word lucky, and I think I am. I'm a lucky person. Man, I'm so lucky. I'm so blessed. See, that sacrifice of the past is the reminder that I've brought something in that really is an amazing miracle. And so, like today, we don't give grain offerings and we don't bring lambs to church, but we give money because that's the source really of our livelihood, and that's we live in an age of commerce with money. Tender is the kind of the basis of that. So we give that, but what we're saying is that we're giving it as an act of gratitude. Like, thank you, Lord. I'm so blessed. I'm so lucky. Then that's important. And Moses is saying, yeah, we've got to come out of Egypt as slaves, but here's what we got to say. God, I'm going to give a sacrifice because I am blessed. Man, I am so fortunate. You have been so good to me. It's an acknowledgement of the past. But the beauty also of a sacrifice is it's also the anticipation of the future. It's the anticipation of future hope and future blessing. And so we're actually saying, thank you, Lord, for the past. I'm going to give something now, and I'm going to connect the past with my future. And in the future, I'm going to believe for a greater increase of this fruit. And so we're kind of making a deal with God in the sense, and I know that doesn't sound good, but we're, in a sense, I said, that we're kind of saying, okay, like God said to Malachi the prophet, bring the tithe into the storehouse, which included grains. And he said, see if I don't open up a window of blessing and pour out a blessing too big for your barns to handle. And so what God is saying is, bring this in and I will secure your future. And so this offering was an acknowledgement of the blessings of God in the past, but it also was with anticipation, hope, and faith in the future that there would be a greater blessing returned. And so Abel's offering, it says there, if you read it, it says, he brought in the firstborn. Abel brought the firstborn. So he took the first, the best. And the reason I know it's the best because it says he brought the fat too. So here's Abel. Get this in your mind. He's thinking to himself, man, I want this to be the best for God. I'm going to do my absolute best. I'm going to do the best I can do. I'm going to give God the best. I'm going to lay down the best that I can do. So his whole life, Abel's whole life was about doing the best. And it says that God affirmed him. God accepted him. God acknowledged that. Man, I'm going to do my best. And I believe sacrifice is far more than just an offering at church. Good grief. Expand the horizon on that and understand that it means I'm going to do the best I can do as a husband. I'm going to be the best wife that I can be. I'm going to do the best job I can do raising my kids. I believe that to have the spirit of Abel is the spirit of excellence. It's the spirit of doing our best. It's like bringing the sacrifice of self-discipline, the sacrifice of our work, labor, imagination, and saying, I'm going to be the best boss. I'm going to be the best employee. I'm going to mow my yard the best I can do. I'm going to clean my house the best I can do. I'm going to sing, and I'm going to sing the best I can sing and worship. And when I'm in church, and I'm going to be the best friend that people have ever had. And I really believe that connects the dots from the past to the future, and that kind of sacrifice secures the future for people. Those kind of people are going to live. Well, what's Cain? Well, here's Cain. It says that Cain, in the process of time, it came to pass, Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Now, the brevity in that description is what's, I think, in contrast to the description of Abel's offering. In other words, Abel's offering was the first and the best. Cain, over the course of time, he just brought something. Now, we're supposed to bring the first fruit. We know later that Moses talks about grain offerings and to bring the first fruit. Now, it's hard to bring the best of the fruit. I guess you could, but if you consider grain, other than slight variations in the heads of those, the grain that's growing in the field, there's not a lot of difference between grain. And so God said, he didn't say bring the best of your grain. He said bring the first of your grain. And it doesn't appear that Cain did this. So what was Cain's attitude like? Well, Cain's the guy that just says, okay, fine, there it is. I really think it's his attitude. I've read a lot on this, and there's different ideas about blood offering, grain offering, or whatever. To me, that's not the issue, because God doesn't address blood in this passage. He does address Cain's attitude. So here's Moses. He's writing the story. He wants the people. He chooses it to be right here in the middle of this story, right after the fall of Adam and Eve. And he wants Israel to understand this, because here's the journey we're all taking. We're all coming out of Egypt and we're all going to the promised land. We've got a journey, and this book helps us understand the journey through these stories. They're full of wisdom and information. And so Moses is saying, all right, guys, if we're going to have a secure future, you've got to sacrifice and be your best at everything you do. Here's Cain. Yeah, Cain may look like he's doing it, but he ain't doing it. Okay? He's not. His attitude is not right. I just kind of see him. He brings in over a course of time. Okay, fine. I got to sacrifice some of this. So here you go. I'll throw it on the altar, light it. Fine. Okay, there. I did my thing. God, are you pleased now? There, I did it. So it seems like he's kind of got this attitude. And what happens is, it says that in verse 5, God did not respect Cain and his offering. That. It wasn't the offering, it was Cain and his offering. It's this attitude. And trust me, the reason we like Cain and Abel, frankly, it's like this the sibling rivalry. Okay, that's kind of a common theme. How about the evil twin? Right, the evil twin. I saw a thing online today because I did some research on the history of the evil twin motif in entertainment, and there was a website that had the top 18 evil twin stories on television, and I was shocked. I mean, everything from Bonanza to newer stories. It's like they work in the evil twin. Why is this so important? It's because Batman and Joker, Superman and Lex Luthor. You always have the evil antithesis, and so Cain and Abel, yes, and later on it's going to be Esau and Jacob. So it's going to return, this whole idea. But why does it resonate? Why does Cain and Abel resonate? Here's why. Listen, because there's Abel in you and there's Cain in you. Okay, and you can choose one or the other. You can choose Abel, I'm going to give my best at everything I do, or you can choose Cain, and I think this is what Moses is saying. Cain is the guy. It looks like he's done it on the surface, but God did not acknowledge, God did not accept Cain or his offering. It was Cain's attitude, and you can look the part, act the part, but deep down inside your heart there's something bitter and something bad, and God recognizes this. Because in verse 5, it says, God didn't recognize Cain's offering. And how do we know that he didn't recognize it? Well, I guess things weren't working out for Cain. Like Abel over here, his flocks are growing. He's happy. He's singing. He's enjoying life. And then Cain's over here, and nothing's working out for him, right? And life sucks, and people are mean, and nobody likes me, and my stupid dad, he made me be a gardener like him. And mom and dad just screwed everything up, right? In the garden we had it together. We could have, why am I here? And this horrible attitude. And so his sacrifice was given with such an attitude that God's like, whoa, Cain, stop. See, when it says that God didn't respect Cain and his offering, to me, it's not like God's angry. Listen, God doesn't need grain. So it's not like God's standing there saying, no, I'm not going to receive your offering. Of course not. Here's what God's saying, and he may be saying it to you. God is saying, you can do better than this. All right, Cain, listen to me. You're not giving your best. You're not giving your best. You don't give the best to your wife. You're not giving the best to your children. You're not giving the best to your employer. You're not giving the best to your culture, your society. You're not giving the best to your neighborhood. You're not giving the best to your church. You're not giving the best to yourself. You can do better. Yeah, I think God's saying, you can do better, Cain. Come on. Pick up your game, man. We need you. And Cain's like an athlete on a basketball team that's loafing, and like the whole team's hurting. Come on, Cain, pick up your game. And God says that in verse 5 it says that God didn't respect Cain and his offering, and it says Cain became angry. Wow, and there's one of the key, that's one of the key kind of troubling factors, I guess you would say, of what makes someone succeed or fail is how they respond to rebuke. Not even rebuke. Let me rephrase that. How they respond to correction. Because all God was saying is like, come on, Cain. If you try harder, you can achieve it. And so Cain's looking over here to Abel, and he's angry. He's angry at God. Cain's angry at himself. And he looks at Abel, and Abel's succeeding. Abel's loving life. He's listening to praise music out there, watching the sheep. And Cain's over here. He's old. No one likes me. And so you get this attitude, and God is saying, come on, Cain, if you do your best, it'll work for you too. So the Lord said to Cain, why are you so angry? Why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? It's like, come on, Cain, if you do well, if you give it your best, clean up your attitude, man. Why are you so angry all the time? Do your best. You're sloughing off. You're better than this. You've got more potential. Engage this potential, this offering. It starts with what we're willing to sacrifice, and are we really doing our best? So Cain's just angry about it. And God said, come on, Cain, we need you to be a part of this. And I think that's Moses' message to Israel. It's like, we need you to step up, man. We need everybody engaged, doing their best at whatever you do. But then God makes the statement that's really the whole crux of the story in verse 7. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. And so what's a door represent? A door means a passing from one realm to another. And God is saying, you know what? Sin is crouching at the door. That is like the serpent that your mother and father encountered. And that serpent is coiled, and that serpent is ready to strike. And it is at the door, and you're getting ready to walk through that door, and you are supposed to rule over it. Cain, don't forget, you're supposed to bruise its head. And it may bruise your heel, but you're going to bruise its head. You are the seed. You are blessed, son. What are you doing thinking like this? That's what God's saying to people. Why are you acting like this? Why are you so angry? Why are you so mean? Why are you so bitter? Oh, I'm bitter because Abel. Forget Abel. Abel is trying hard. That's why he's blessed. You can be blessed too, but you got to straighten up your attitude. You're getting ready to pass through a door, and you don't even know what's on the other side. But I'm telling you, you should rule over that hissing, coiled serpent. But man, that thing's going to strike, and when it does, your life is going to be really messed up. And Cain didn't listen. Verse 8 says, Cain talked to Abel, his brother. That came to pass, when they were in the field, Cain rose up against him, and he killed Abel. First man born on earth was a murderer. And he was angry at Cain because Cain was blessed. And I'm telling you, jealousy is a horrible thing. Listen, if you deal with jealousy, that's a snake at the door. You can't let yourself pass over that door. You gotta put that thing under your heel and continuously do it. Jealousy, anger turns to just cynicism and then criticism and murder in its full extent. And so what happened? Well, Cain murdered Abel. And then God comes down to Cain. Verse 9, God says, where's Abel, your brother? He said, well, I don't know. My brother's keeper. I think that's ironic because a keeper is a shepherd. And so Abel was a shepherd. It's just kind of ironic that Cain says, well, I'm not my brother's shepherd. And Cain's kind of insisting, maybe not insisting, but insinuating that maybe perhaps God is responsible to look after Abel. I'm not God. Okay, that might be our response. I'm not God. What I find interesting is that Cain answered God's question with a question which reminds me a lot of the serpent when he asked Eve, you're not going to die. God knows in the day. Or he asked Eve right off the bat, did God say that you can eat of all the fruit of the trees? And so that subtle lying spirit now was in Cain. And boy, jealousy and not doing your best and then being cynical and sarcastic and angry with people and upset that things aren't working out for you, and you look at everybody else, it seems like they're getting all the blessings and there's none for you, and you go ahead and walk through that door and you let that coiled serpent strike and that venom gets in you, and suddenly you become more serpent-like than human-like. And I think this is exactly what Moses wants to say to the children of Israel, the slaves coming out of Egypt, searching for the promised land. He's saying, guys, this attitude, this is going to destroy people. And it did. It did. Let's read on. I'm going to finish in just 2 or 3 more minutes. Just read what happened to Cain. God says, so now you're cursed from the earth, man. You've been bitten with this venom, and your attitude is such that you're cursed. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive, a vagabond, you shall be on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive, a vagabond on the earth. And it will happen that anyone finds me, they're going to kill me. Isn't it interesting? Isn't that ironic, too, that Cain's worried about being murdered while he's a murderer? It's kind of one of those things, I guess, it takes one to know one, right? If you think everybody hates you, it's probably because you have a lot of hate in your heart for people. So you assume everybody else is like you. It takes one to know one. Like if you think everybody's uppity and you think everybody's a snob or whatever, it's because you got some issues of that in your heart. And so you're assuming that, projecting that on other people in many cases. And so it's interesting and kind of ironic, isn't it, that Cain was worried about being killed when he himself was a killer. And the Lord said to him, therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. And that just means put a mark on him that no one would touch him. The word of the Lord over Cain was that if anyone hurt him, vengeance would be taken sevenfold. And it's interesting then how all of that developed in the next few verses. And I'm going to let you read, after we're done here, verses 16 to 25. I want you to finish chapter 4 tonight. Don't turn it off and go watch YouTube. Or the rest of the videos on YouTube. I guess you're watching it now, aren't you? I want you to read verses 16 to 25. Here's the assignment, and then you can chat this and give me some of your answers. The word of the Lord over Cain was that whoever hurts him is going to be hurt sevenfold. And I want you to see how Satan mutated that. Okay, look at the generations that followed Cain and look at what happened to them. Look at the escalation of violence. That's specific. Look at the escalation of violence. Look at how what was in Cain literally, almost like a virus, right? One man just started this whole vengeance kind of thing, a vendetta, a culture of vendetta, a culture of reprisal that escalates. And that's what happens. It's like a kid. You get hit, you hit your buddy that hard and he hits you that hard, and then you hit him that hard, and then it just escalates. And that's what happened. Things escalate. And there was a culture of escalation through vengeance, and it really, really got bad. It got ugly. It got dark because of what Cain did. So moral of the story, and I want to hear some things that you saw, some perspectives that you saw. So leave me some comments. The moral of the story, man, get your heart right and do your best. Okay? Get your heart right and do your best in everything you can. All right? Sunday we'll be online at Open Door, Ohio. So join us. We're going to start broadcasting at 10:30, and then watch my Facebook page because I've got some other stuff that I'm going to share with you too about Sunday. Pretty exciting. Bye-bye.